Yeah, but I don't necessarily agree it's wrong.
No,
No, but
I didn't mention that. We don't disagree with them. We just don't have any.
But
Yeah, but then it's not our. No, but it's not our call. So it doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree.
Okay, everybody, if I could bring the meeting to order. I understand we're on live stream, so everybody looking smart.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, well, firstly, welcome to our first meeting of the Implementation Committee, 14th of October. Just going through the agenda. Are there any apologies? Councillor Laws, is here an apology? Or?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll move a motion to accept that apology. We have a mover. Councillor Hope. Second, Kate. Those for to accept. Those for. Aye. Against. Carried. Thank you. We'll take the agenda as agreed. Any conflicts of interest?
We've all got rabbits.
We've all got rabbits.
I haven't.
No.
None.
Okay. Is there any public forum, Liz? No public forum. Okay. In terms of matters for consideration, we've got two.
Minutes too.
Liz has said the minutes, but
there are no minutes.
She's just.
Okay, so we've got two matters for consideration today. The first one of which I'll be chairing, the Biosecurity Implementation Improvement Update Pest Management, and the second, the Catchment Advisory Group report back, which Councillor Hope will be chairing. Right, without further ado, let's move into this first report, the Biosecurity Implementation Improvement Update Pest Management. Welcome to Andrea, welcome to Gavin. The author of... Oh, okay. And so...
Richard Laws.
Hi, Richard. How are you going there? Right. So if anybody's got any technical questions, we've got Richard based in Alexandria, yeah? Okay, firstly, acknowledge that the author of this report is Andrea Howard, and acknowledge the good work and the hard work that's been going on over a period of time. So thank you, Andrea, and which has been endorsed by Gavin Palmer, and of course, under our CE, Sarah. Thank you. There's 3 points that I'd like to highlight before we discuss this report. Firstly, just to reaffirm the purpose of this report. It's to provide an update on the program of transformation underway for the biosecurity function through a range of business improvement initiatives. It's also concentrating on the progress in implementing new rabbit management initiatives under the Regional Pest Management Plan, including better engagement with Pacific communities, tangible solutions to facilitate rabbit control in problematic peri-urban areas, and stepping up monitoring and compliance programs. And that's a topic that we've been talking about at this council for quite a period of time. And then finally, a decision is sought on the future ownership and use of OLC's rabbit control assets. The second point I'd like to refer to is on page, not sure what page it's on actually.
Paragraph?
Anyway, it's paragraph 16, where it simply says there are a range of tools available to help manage rabbit populations and stakeholders, and council acknowledges that improvements related to its role are required. So that acknowledgement is being made. We've got an issue, and that this work has begun. Staff, however, are confident that further progress to address this problem can be made within the existing Regional Pest Management Plan framework. And finally, I would just like to reaffirm the recommendations. Certainly everybody has read them, but there's a bit of meat on each particular one. And that the council receives this report. Secondly, notes the recent development and implementation of a program of work to deliver on council's feral rabbit responsibilities under the previously approved regional pest management plan and the operational plan. Third, notes the progress made in developing a revised inspection and compliance approach. 4, notes increased operational focus on land occupier compliance, including land owned or controlled by the Crown, Crown agencies and local authorities. 5, notes progress made by the ORC to establish and implement a model to support small-scale landowner-led rabbit control operations. 6, notes the range of business improvements made to the rabbit program and wider biosecurity function in order to achieve the objectives of the regional pest management plan, operational plan, and better meet community expectations. And 7, notes the planned recruitment. So we can't do it with our existing staff. We need the recruitment of 3 additional fixed-term positions within the biosecurity team, 2 of which will focus exclusively on the OSC's regional pest management plan rabbit program. 8, notes that detailed resourcing required to better deliver a comprehensive rabbit management program aligned to the council's responsibilities under the plans and the community's expectations will be presented as part of the forthcoming long-term plan development process. And I suspect at that point we'll be looking at the dollars, Hillary, and dotting the I's and the T's and so forth. And finally, today we need to decide, or at least give a steer. We don't necessarily, because as we debate it, we'll see that the financial side has not been outlined in this report, but decide whether to support option 1, option 2, option 3 when considering the future use of OSC rabbit control assets. Now, my thoughts in terms of how to handle this report is to separate it into 2. So we basically talk about everything excluding the OSC rabbit control assets, and we'll do that as a second stage. Okay, so I'm actually happy to open the discussion up. In the first instance, ideally questions. I'm hoping as a committee that we spend most of their time actually discussing the report, debating the report, as opposed to spending all the time on questions. Anyway, I've got 2 hands in there. I've got Councillor Deaker and then Councillor Hope and then and Kate. Yeah. Okay, so Councillor Deaker.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I said this to Andrea and Gavin before the meeting started, actually, but this is a hell of a good paper.
Yeah.
And I, stretching my memory back, but I cannot remember in the past or my time on this council an optimistic paper on rabbits. And this is an optimistic paper. It's full of boom, 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 gung-ho, we're going to do this. Now, doing it doesn't mean the last rabbit's going to get killed. We all know that. But I think, and thanks to the pest management plan and all the people like Andrew who did an awful lot of work on that, this has given us impetus. And we've got some evidence to back up our optimism and the recent successful work at Clyde. And Richard, you deserve credit for this too, for your expertise and constant work on this issue. So I thank you for that, Richard. But this is a good paper in all sorts of ways, and I'm thrilled to see it on the agenda. I'm going to endorse every bit of it. I'm not sure how I'll go on the ownership of the assets. I think probably let's keep them.
Let's talk about that next.
And let's lease them to somebody effective. But this is so good, and I congratulate everybody who's brought this onto the table and said, let's go for it.
Thank you. Actually, before we go to Councillor Hope, apologies, Andrea and Gavin. What would you like to say about this report? I do apologise.
I think take it as read.
Take it as read. Sarah?
I'm really happy just to carry on.
Yeah, okay. I'm sure it'll all come out in the discussion. So we've got Councillor Hope.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Actually, I was just going to ask those two exactly that question, which you've already
said, but there is something I'd like to ask you, and it may be to do with Richard in the background, which is at number 50 on page 14 of 37, we go through the case study at Clyde. And I was just liking to ask you, what were the learnings from that? Now, I've read that, but what are the learnings in a way that we know that there's been the complaint, we've responded to it, to the peri-urban, we've implemented the new rules, but technically, is there anything that you have come across or slightly different or something else that we can incorporate? And I'm delighted to see too, we also have some new staff dedicated to this area. So I'd be interested, please, in the response of how it went.
Yep, thank you. Through the chair, Richard will probably be able to add to this. So I think the first lesson was that if we embark on something that's a bit different for us, that it may just well have a positive outcome. So I guess that was the number one learning of entering a new space in terms of facilitation and or a more formal space. So one, it can work. Two, I think just in terms, it's quite tricky in terms of timing and understanding roles and responsibilities, but again, with strong facilitation and leadership and really making it easy for people to do something that they may or may not necessarily want to recognise that it's their issue. ORC can play a role in helping make it as easy as possible for them. I think we learnt some sort of technical lessons around just, we increased some signage. There was some feedback around poison lying around. So we responded to that complaint, and as a result of that, we added some signage. I think generally in terms of time frame, so there was a little bit of a weather delay to start with, and we had sort of like a specific date, so we probably just need to be a bit more generic around that because these things are complicated. What we are going to continue to do is follow up. So the job isn't done when the poison is laid. We've got to check that it's worked. We've got to check that all the health and safety and we, it's not technically our role, but we would like to have oversight of kind of wrapping up these projects, and then also following up in whatever period of time is appropriate to make sure that secondary control work is going on. So I don't know, Richard, is there anything else to add?
Yes, thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Mr. Chair. There's one thing I'd like to note that I think where there was a real will and desire by that local community to make something happen, and it did. I'm not saying as we head forward and into all the other areas that we're looking at that it may be as straightforward as this one, but it's been a very successful outcome. Another one I'd like to add is another one that we're involved in at Te Awa Road, where we applied the new rules within our regional pest plan. It was actually led by a member of the community up there that had two people that were absentee owners that were reluctant to get on board, but we applied the rules within our plan and worked very, very well. And those two owners came on board at the same time the rest of the operation went on. So it was really successful in that front. With the Clyde one, I don't really have too much more to add, but we are going to have a debrief and certainly sort of go right through it. But yes, certainly successful. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you. And a couple of words that resonated to me yesterday when Carmen and I had a briefing with Andrew and Gavin. Gavin made the comment, there's certain attributes that are required with these communities like Clyde. There needs to be a critical mass in terms of the rabbits. But I think, as Richard said, I think one of the key things is the community will and ultimately the structure and we doing our role, liaison role and facilitation, but using all that community and focusing all that community energy in a positive way. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Delighted to see progress being made. Two things. Paragraph 16, you talk about a number of methods available. I'm not sure that people understand what they are. And I think it would be helpful at some stage, not necessarily now, to get a really good idea of what those methods are, because obviously you're relying from the Clyde one quite a lot on fencing, which is quite a different method than actually eradication. It just constrains them and that makes them someone else's problem really. Under the RMPM, whatever it is, I've got the RP the wrong way around. Can you impose? I understand killing things and those sort of rules, but actually requiring people to fence, can you require that? So that's a method that you use but isn't a requirement rule.
Through the chair, that's correct. In terms of paragraph 16, I'm referring to tools in terms of council's role as opposed to extermination tools, but we can cover those as well. But just in terms of compliance, collaboration, partnership, education, advocacy, so those sorts of things that we can do from, educating people about their roles and responsibilities, facilitating outcomes, and then enforcing our rules. But we do not have a specific one around the requirement to fence.
Okay. If I may, I've got a couple. The other one is, and I think, again, it's about the messaging to the wider public. I understand on paragraph 57 the rollouts, and I'm delighted to see places like Moraki, where I've heard there's been years of problems in there. I don't understand what those areas look like. And I think, again, in order to give people the opportunity to buy into that, pre-planning by setting out what the area you think the issue is and maybe getting landowners to think about joining in, and it would be great. Lake Hayes is huge. I'm not sure if you mean the whole of Lake Hayes or just one small part. So is that, at some stage, can we get it presented like that, or is that too difficult?
Through the chair, no, that's entirely possible. At the moment, we're keeping it quite broad because we appreciate that the areas in which require attention are quite broad. Yeah. As we start to, and more will emerge as we, become more active in this space than we may have been in the past. So what we need is a clear prioritisation tool. We simply, I don't think, will have quite enough capacity to meet the demand at the moment. But I think there are ways in which we can develop models and material that allow other people. We don't always have to be in the room. I think initially we do, but we also want to set up a model and approach that people can kind of, look on a web page and see what sort of steps they need to do. So what we would then do is, collate all of the areas of concern, put a priority over them in terms of a number of criteria, such as community engagement, and then scope those out. But what we found in the Clyde example is once it was notified in the paper, a couple of other landowners actually came to us and said, can I be involved? Yeah. So we don't want to keep anything too specific, but if we're doing a specific project, it will have boundaries around it.
Okay. I think giving that opportunity to get the greater area and those other landowners in is great, in that it manages it at a much better degree. And if I can ask the last question.
Yeah, can I just jump in before you answer that question? Just point out in terms of the first question that on paragraph 18, it does actually illustrate some of the techniques that are available: poison, shooting, fumigation, natural predators, fencing, biological agents. So some of that information's there. And also, in terms of your second question, just something that we talked about yesterday, Andrew and Gavin, is that on a micro level, Clyde, you're going into a small, very urban community, but potentially, building on Kate's question, the scale could be bigger. Yeah, and you referred to the Maniatoto model, where potentially, depending on the scale, that, as you said, we may not need to be in the room, but that's not going to happen overnight, is it? There's a bit of one's the facilitation of a contractor coming in a small community, but maybe there's a scale opportunity for an entity to be established to fulfil certain requirements. Is that fair, Andrea, Gavin?
Through the chair, potentially. I think we're sort of dealing with two different issues. One is in the traditional rabbit-prone areas where there are large-scale landowners, and then the other is in the newly fast-growing peri-urban areas where you've got a completely different mix of people with a different level of understanding about the environment, about rabbits. Obviously, the more landowners you have, the more complex it is to try and manage and bring people together. So I think there's and different strategies, I guess, are going to work best for those small groups versus the large-scale properties where the Maniatoto Pest Company model potentially is more applicable.
Yeah, so there's a number of tools in the toolbox depending on the issue. Sorry, Kate, I'll back to you.
And I certainly don't want to debate the issue with you, Mr. Chairman, but paragraph 18 also goes on to say some of those methods are no longer that great and with mixed results. And that's why I think people understanding actually what is the best practice right now is there isn't clarity about that.
Okay.
Shooting is fairly effective, but the other ones when you have to use what type of bait and how often, I don't think there is a great knowledge out there. And I think the more that we can ensure that knowledge is shared and going to people like Maniatoto Pest and getting that stuff at best practice and understanding it is much more of a science than something just going and doing it. In fact, it can be quite incorrect for people to just go and do their own thing.
Kate, Richard, did you have any comment on that? Just about the evolution of the options and any comment?
Yeah, certainly, Mr. Chair. We are very limited within urban, peri-urban areas as to what control options we can put out there. There was a good paper prepared by a consultant probably 2 or 3 years ago for the Peas and Maureen's area, and we could certainly make that paper available. Included in that paper, it makes mention of all the available control methods that Councillor Wilson refers to, so that's certainly available.
Great, thank you.
And so my last question, and I was intrigued by figure 2.
Compared to figure 3, and that we're monitoring some areas, but we're not monitoring some of the areas that are most prone. I'm almost nervous. I don't want to monitor for monitor's sake, and I'm really nervous that what we'll find is stuff that we don't want to necessarily find. But it's the trending that I'm concerned about. That it looks like a good report when you read this, but we're actually not monitoring a substantial number of extreme areas and extremely prone areas. And I wasn't quite sure where your monitoring that you're going to consider will be placed and how that was going to roll out. Could you explain that, please?
Through the Chair, just to go back to your previous question, what we will do is develop some information that we can put on our website about various control tools for various circumstances. So that'd be great. If that doesn't already exist, I'm still relatively new, so I'm not entirely sure what's on our website. We will make sure that that's available in a format that's useful for people. In terms of the monitoring, so we need, I guess, our monitoring trends to identify where there are new and emerging areas, but also to identify where we've had some success. So having a look at the map, we certainly don't cover the region, so we've had an initial meeting with Manaki Whenua Landcare Research, and they're going to help us devise a monitoring network that will best meet our needs. So we're taking expert advice on using their scientific, I guess, knowledge about where it would make most sense. I'm sure Richard will be able to add to this. I think there would have been some thought into where those current sites are placed, but as time changes and climate changes and land use changes, we have to reflect that in our monitoring network.
Okay, great. Very good. Marion, I'll put you on the list, but I've got Councillor Forbes.
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
Shall I just go one at a time or a whole lot?
You could do. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things as I read through this report that I noticed was how we kind of got to where we are, which was a really good assessment because I didn't know that landowners really didn't want to see, I guess they didn't want to keep paying the rates for the job to be done. And it seems to me that when we'll get to a point when we'll get that resistance again. Because you'll get to a point when the job is nearly done and things are pretty much under control and people will stop wanting to pay for it. So do we have a bit of a plan to make sure that we carry on and that we don't, I know it's hard to do that into the future, but I'm sort of thinking we need to let people know that we have to keep going, that we stopped last time too early because they didn't want to pay for it. How do we keep that going?
Yeah.
I guess it's up to us to explain the reasons why it's important that we continue to control. So it's a slightly different context in that that the land ratepayers of Otago are paying for us to provide leadership, facilitation, advocacy, education, not direct control. So that's different from the past. But obviously there are economic and environmental benefits to biosecurity. What we want to move to more in the future is linking up our biosecurity activities for biodiversity outcomes. So that's another, I guess, rationale or driver that we need to be able to clearly communicate the why to our community. So I
think we have to take that very seriously and maintain this communication right through the program and make sure that we don't let our eye be diverted again.
And Alexa, Andrew, before you referred to secondary control. So, for example, the Clyde, is that primary control? Yeah, so you're going to do primary control, but it never stops. You get it to a point, we've handed over to secondary control, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah, so plus the ongoing communication.
That's right. I think we really need to prioritise that. Secondly is the fencing was really interesting to me. It's and this is tied in with how we work with the territorial authorities. It seems that all I hear from the territorial authorities is that OIC is not doing its job. What I didn't understand, and again, thank you for a really comprehensive report, was that the TAs, we've asked them before to have their own plans and they haven't picked that up. So I think we need to, and you've talked about opening discussions with them, and that's really, really good, and I want to make sure we maintain that communication too. But fencing of subdivisions seemed really weird to me. I was like, well, one, how do we make that happen? And two, what does it stop that's not rabbits? And the main thing I can think of that it stops that's not rabbits is children. You know, you're putting in fencing. I just think that goes against my community ideals. But
Fences run around.
Yes, that's exactly right. No, thank you. I mean, kids love to run down to reserves and to riverbanks and all those things. But, you know, that's one thought. I thought fencing seems like, I don't like the idea of fencing our subdivisions.
Okay, so there's some logistical issues, but you can obviously go over fence with the right design, yeah? Humans.
And is there anything in the ground that is, I don't know, is there anything else that is, and what happens to the rabbits that are outside that fence? Do they become really bad on reserve lands and things like that? I don't know how that approach would work, and I think it'll take some selling into TA.
I think some of the idea is because it's so difficult to control the rabbits in those urban settings, because the more concentrated the area is with people, the more difficult it is to find a method of control that's going to have an element of safety. And so fencing is what is actually quite a safe way, at the very least, of avoiding the infestation of rabbits once you've got them under control in the fenced area, avoiding the infestation of rabbits in those areas where actually it's super hard to control them once they're there.
So it's about that practical logistic issue, and I don't know any answers. I just kind of go, ooh, I'm not sure. I think that'll be hard to get TAs on board with that. I can understand why they haven't easily come on board with that.
After saying that, that's what we've asked. Well, that's what we're hoping landowners will do, is rabbit fence their properties, yes, so they manage it and control their responsibility. Yeah.
I think that's going to be an interesting discussion. So I don't know how we're going to approach it.
And sorry, through the chair, one of the other, I don't think there's a requirement for people doing new subdivisions to do poison control before they start. So there are some other things that could be used. I don't know, Richard, is there anything you want to add to that around subdivisions?
Just one thing. It was actually looked at through the review of the pest plan, but the cost benefit analysis didn't stack up on that front, so we couldn't go any further with that one. But certainly, rabbit fencing is very effective in containing rabbits or excluding rabbits and being able to deal with the rabbits while they're within that defined area. While rabbits know no boundaries and they continue to keep coming and going between different property boundaries. We got people doing control, not doing control. It can be quite futile for a lot of those landowners who are undertaking good control, but keep getting infected from outside.
Yeah, challenging. And there's one last thing that question was when the night counts, and you're going to have a formal review of where they happen, which is awesome. But you say that that's in 2020, and the year's kind of running out. I'm wondering, is that on schedule, or that is? So it's still going to happen this year.
It has to, because it has to inform the LTP. Great. Potentially a significant increase in monitoring. Style of monitoring, what we monitor, and that is a resource requirement. So that's got to feed into LTP.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Calvert.
Several sort of disparate questions. The first is, how far does a rabbit go? Anyone know?
Depends if you shoot it or not. Andrea Gavin. Richard.
Yes, I can answer that. Look, a rabbit, under normal circumstances, has a home range of about 2 to 3 hectares and doesn't really go beyond that.
Cool.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course you can.
When there are large numbers of rabbits, they do go further than that. They'll also swim, so they can swim across certain widths of water. But if they are under pressure, they will spread. So in their own home habitat, and if the numbers aren't large, they will stay within that 2 to 3 hectares. Okay. But when the numbers increase, then they spread further.
Okay.
Just like humans.
Yeah.
Our plan seems to be predicated on things we can do partially through cooperation with each other and good neighbours and things, and partially through being obliged to do something according to a scale of having too many of them. Both those things seem to me to start with the ability to know how many there are right now. So it seems to me the monitoring is absolutely the first part, because I noticed the same thing I think that Kate noticed, which was the rabbit proneness all over the place, and the monitoring in a crescent. Yeah. I noticed that particularly because I am focused personally on the part that isn't being monitored in the middle of the crescent, which says rabbit, extremely rabbit prone. And we're saying it's extremely rabbit prone, but we don't know. And so if I went to my 5 different neighbours, most of whom are government departments and councils and things, and said, hey, jack up your ideas, there's too many, let's all do something about this. If I was them, each of them would hopefully politely say to me, what do you mean there's too many? How do you know there's too many? And I say, there's holes all over my ground out.
Okay, so we need monitoring, yeah?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, would the beginning of the process therefore be not only generally more monitoring, but the ability to say, can we ask for somebody to come and do some monitoring in a particular area? So, if there was a will somewhere, but nobody knew whether there was too many of them.
Okay, so the question is, we've got overall monitoring, but in a particular issue, can we bring in and get more specific monitoring?
And can we generally have more?
Yeah.
So I think we've got the answer to that, being that monitoring is just one mechanism to understand the problem. The other is inspections. So we've got an inspection program in place, and sort of newly revised, that covers all of the areas. So we're doing as much as we can, and that's property by property, looking for evidence of rabbits. So that I guess is the key tool, and the monitoring supports that.
And we could expect that up on a website or something, so we could say, hey, there it is, or that.
Potentially we can do areas. I don't think, we would sort of signal that we were coming to property A next week, but we could definitely, and we have really already in here, signalled the areas of focus, and we just do as much as we can with the resources we have.
Okay, you good? Hillary? Yeah. Actually, just before I go to Councillor Hobbs, in that community, say the community approaches us, say Clyde approaches us, and 2/3 of the people say, we've got a big problem, we need your help, but a third say, we're not going to pay for it. What happens then?
So we can use our enforcement powers if that's appropriate. So we have an enforcement tool.
Yeah.
And we have a rule. As property sizes and land use changes, the rule becomes slightly more problematic. The rule was designed to deal with larger scale properties. The reason it becomes...
Are you talking about MAL 3 or...?
Correct. So it becomes problematic when we're unable to identify who owns the rabbit, because that's really partly a compliance thing. So the smaller the properties, the more it's useful to use our persuasion and our facilitation.
So that's why the community will is so important. But that may be tested at some point, just if you've got so maybe we back off and say, hey, you sort your community out and we'll come back.
So as Richard alluded to before, we did have that scenario where 95% of the community was on board. There were 2 landowners who weren't really interested, so we sent them a nice letter, just encouraging them in terms of what their requirements might be, and they agreed to then be part of the joint control effort.
Okay.
So it's possible,
so
not everybody.
There's a few tools in the toolbox, education, so forth. Councillor Hobbs and then Councillor Robinson.
First of all, thank you for a really excellent paper. I loved the history, and I think it actually tells us things now. There's one wee thing I want to know. There's quite a few things. 1880s, it talks about biological agents coming in. Were they stoats and weasels?
The 1880s?
Yeah.
I believe so, Richard.
He's nodding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, take that as a yes.
Okay, the second thing that I find quite interesting is when you go on that, this is on page 7 of 37, when you go on the thing of 1947, you had a rabbit board, there was a government subsidy, there were rates charged to landholders. Then 1984, all withdrawn. Then we asked again for regional councillors to take it over. And then in 1993, landholders actively sought to accept responsibility for rabbit control themselves, which is really quite interesting because it's going round in circles again, and rates charged removed. Okay, so it's just an observation I want to make, because as a person, a social historian, I always find it interesting that we go around in circles with our arguments.
We're following the rabbits.
We're following the rabbits. If I could just like to take you to paragraph 58, which is on, paragraph 58 coming up. 2 pictures. Staff will undertake further assessments to proactively, that was a split infinitive, to determine proactively any other areas that would benefit from a collaborative approach. These facilitated projects are resource hungry. I just want to argue and make the point. They may be resource hungry, but they're public relations rich. And I think that the story you've already told about Clyde and its community is it's a cost that we'll have to bear for a while. So that when we come to costs, there are stories to tell. At the moment, you're telling stories to the people affected by rabbits. But this is a cost borne by everyone. And those people living in those houses up there that I'm looking at don't have any concerns about rabbits. In fact, with driving with them home from somewhere else the other night, they avoided killing a rabbit running across the road. I was saying, get him! But that wasn't making any difference because they don't like that sort of thing. We have to tell that story to the majority of the ratepayers who are urban, because this is a cost and we have to tell the story. Just an argument I want to make. Thank you.
Okay. Health and safety, you're not supposed to deviate quickly on the road to kill a rabbit. There's other tolls. I've got Councillor Robinson next. I am hoping that we're going to move from questions to actually views and debate.
That's what I'm sort of doing.
Yeah, thank you. And at some point, I'm going to go to Councillor Callagher and say, well, what do you think? Councillor Robinson.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess that's where I was hoping to go with. What's our current approach, which it suggests that we've currently got a light touch approach, and that we need to consider that with the current LTP process, I suppose. So that's, really what we are thinking about, I suppose, and is our job, and how we make a decision regarding how we step forward as a council and as a region is with us. So, moving from light touch probably is what we need to focus on. But in saying that as well, having sat through the Regional Pest Management Plan development as well, and the paper also reflects on this, it was a comprehensive chance for the community to have a say on where they felt the council should go. And some of the key themes that came out of that are reflected in this as well. There was actually not very much that came through saying that the council should undertake the management itself, the actual controlling of rabbits, while some individuals may have presented that it wasn't actually their organisation's stance. There wasn't that much of that. Then there was the type of community self-management models are the way to go, and please don't get too heavy in rating us and doing stuff for us. We've got this under control in some areas, and we're willing to act as models and assist you, and we're developing models for pest management type companies. Wanted the McLean scale lifted to 4 though. Then we've got people who said that we really just need to up our enforcement. We just need to get out there and make sure that we're making people do things, because there's those that aren't. Then we've got the issue of peri-urban and urban and being more proactive in them, because it's very difficult for people to actually undertake control, as we've heard as well. So those are key themes, and I think that our approach actually is reflecting what the community asked us to do, which takes me to what Hilary just said, which was, however, at this point, gathering data and being really transparent of the issues and where they actually are probably is the starting point. People won't act unless they can see the real reason for acting, and probably the most helpful that we could be at this point is provision of that. However, I do think we should have a really good think as a council what staff are actually saying, and that this is a light touch approach at the moment. I'd like to hear more about that with time, and also more when we get into our assets and what our long-term goals might be. I would like to see a much clearer work stream of the phases then that we're going to move through, from, say, data collection and working collaboratively with communities to how that's going to progress long term. The regional pest management plans are developed so that, and they have a budget with them, and you're supposed to stick to that budget. So you can do more, I think, but if you're going to vastly go away from the plan and the budget that you've already written in there, you would need to consider that, and whether you needed to do a change to the plan for the particular pest that you're considering, and another cost-benefit analysis to see if the things that you're doing need to be actually reviewed. But I think we should have a clear vision of where we're going to. So we're currently working with peri-urban type groups, small towns, etc. We're doing this with the larger scale land holders. We're doing this with gathering data. We're doing this with enforcement. We're moving through various phases. Looking at page 11, and there was a reflection there on what our outcomes were aiming to be versus our action plan, and I wondered whether they actually lined up all that well. There's some really good outcomes trying to be sought the action plan is quite restrictive to the things that we just heard about from Andrea of being.
Sorry, darling, is the action plan on page 19? Is that the action plan? Table 4. Is that what you're
operational? Sorry, there's 5. Where am I? Sorry, I'm just trying to do this without paper. 5 delivery areas on paragraph 38 there, which is mainly, raising awareness, working collaboratively, being a leader, those types of things, as opposed to the actual compliance actions, those types of things. So whether they're kind of more of a phase 1 of everyone working together, learning, then perhaps you would move again into, I would think, being more compliance focused and more action focused. Otherwise, just constantly facilitating and raising awareness.
So, Councillor Robinson, just so I've got it clear in my mind, are you speaking in support of this paper, or are you challenging?
I'm saying the paper's good, but it's challenging us, I think, and it hasn't gone as far as we need to go in our thinking. Of what are we actually being asked here? We're being told that it's a light touch. We're being told we're going to need to do more in the LTP. How are we going to get to those decisions? Have we got it all here? Is there more?
I think we have.
Yeah.
But it isn't, I was actually excited by the pathway. That's actually, we need a more comprehensive monitoring. We at last are getting a strategy for the peri-urban situation, and there's a list of communities that could be tackled over the next period of time, and they're saying, well, actually in 2 to 3 years' time, we actually could be on top of that, on top of the significant areas. On top of that, there's the compliance approach in terms of we've now got a more resilient plan, and we've identified the inspections and those that passed and those that failed, and re-inspecting them next year. I would have thought, you can't necessarily, each community is not at the same stage, we can't just go from monitoring everybody and then going into because we've got a limited resource. We have to do certain things simultaneously.
Seeing a comprehensive plan of where are the issues and then where we should focus is what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Callaghan, I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you. I agree with Councillor Robinson. It's actually interesting. I found the paper an interesting, detailed paper, but I think it is a light touch, and it's quite light and optimistic in certain elements. So it certainly fits with the pest plan as we currently have it, but I remain with real concerns. And when you look at the history of this pest started way back in the 1800s and has never gone away. And there has been a response to this pest each time it has escalated to a point where people have said, God, we've had enough, we can't take this anymore. And one of those responses was pest destruction boards. Another one of those responses was an illegal introduction of a biological agent. So it's never going to go away. And then alongside this pest, we've got other new pests that are appearing. And all the same people, we have people out there who can manage these pests, and we don't have great coordination of them. So there's a number of issues there. What I found with the report was that, look, it's great. It's light on the, when you meet with, you're organising with a group, and you've got an initial hit needed and then you've got a follow-up. And I found the report was sort of not combining those two together. The primary and secondary control is all one level of control over almost forever in a way. The Clyde Golf Course example as one in pulling people together is a really interesting example, because what that area needed was clout from a regulator to force some organisations who were saying, nah, stuff it, we're okay, to not actually take action. And that clout worked in this example, so it's a good example there.
Yeah.
When you look at replicating that across the other problem areas, and we've got an awful lot of them.
Yeah.
We have, river reserves are massive feeders of rabbits. The commons grounds, and whoever is responsible for those, and that's varied, have been very much standoff and rabbit control. Yeah. And
doesn't this report say that we're going to be getting into those areas?
It does, but it's light on it. So this report is heavier on farmers and peri-urban lifestyle.
So when you say light, are we talking? Do we just need some more detail on it?
I'm just talking about emphasis, because I'm taking from the report where the emphasis will sit. So we're looking at. We are going to, I would take from this that one of the sites, maybe it's around Cromwell, you might be dealing with 50 landowners in trying to get a group together to undertake rabbit control.
Yeah.
I'm very worried that with 3 extra staff, how we segregate those areas out, where the boundaries are, the workload involved to do this all in a timely manner over the next couple of years.
Good.
The other things I think must be doing is working very closely with TLAs about conditions on consents for subdivisions about rabbit fencing. It is unacceptable for them to be granting consents for subdivisions in rural areas and just not requiring rabbit fencing.
Yeah.
I understand that it's to do with the Fencing Act and other aspects of subdivisions where some people don't put boundary fences in their subdivisions. But there could be conditions put on those subdivisions that they are required to rabbit fence, and that would just be one tool that is put in place from the start. So I think that is one part of it. The Maniatoto model, I don't believe we can expect a whole heap of Maniatoto models to appear. In fact, I think we're really limited in places that can be replicated. The Lindis might be one. Maniatoto model is a shareholding in a cooperative, and how you're going to get 50 or 100 lifestyle blocks to all suddenly take up a shareholding in a cooperative to do a one-off hit, and then the ongoing years of management that you need to do for this pest is questionable. So we talk a lot about that, but it's very rare, I think, that those situations will occur. So look, I support the direction for the time being, but I'm highlighting that I think we need to be more heavily involved. And there are some critical parts of that around skills and that I have real concerns about. But
when you say we, who are you talking about?
We as the council.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave that for now. Thank you.
No, and I'm going to pass over to our CE to make opportunity to make a comment. But is it fair to say, Gary, that maybe we've got enough information there to start some discussions through the LTP process, or do we need some more detail before we get there?
I believe we definitely need to be revisiting with the community through the LTP process. What do they see as the management of these pests and others for the next 50 years? Yeah. And do they believe that community can handle it? Yeah. Or do they believe that a more heavy-handed, more involved ORC is needed?
Okay. Sarah.
Okay. First of all, I just want to check with Andrea. How many staff do you have dedicated to rabbits?
1.
Right.
That's a real...
So the reason why I asked the question of Andrea, I wanted to make sure that I was correct, is we can't do what you're describing if we're not provided with the budget and the resource in order to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And so I refer you back to recommendation 8, because that is where you are going to have to make some difficult decisions about how much money and how much resource you want to put into this. We can only do what has been described in the paper with the resource we currently have. We are ready and willing to do more, but we're going to have a conversation with you tomorrow afternoon. That's going to spell out what it's going to look like in terms of dollars and in terms of resource need at a high level. And that's where we need your support to be able to do the work. So I just want to make that point, because I'm not disagreeing with Councillor Kelleher at all, but I'm just saying when Andrew's got one dedicated resource, let's be realistic about what's possible.
Yeah.
It's no wonder it's a light touch.
Yeah. And you're, in this recommendation 7, you're asking to triple it to get 3 people. Yeah.
No, we're not asking, we're doing it.
Yeah.
We are tripling it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying
Is that 3 more?
More, yeah.
it's 3 more on fixed term. Because that's what we can accommodate inside of our budget. But what I'm saying to you is, we're going to have a conversation in a workshop tomorrow, which is going to be quite a stark reality in terms of what it's going to look like in order for us to ramp this up. When you put that on top of all of the other demands on this council at the moment, the decision is going to sit with you about your comfort levels, about how far we can afford to push it.
Great, thank you. Sarah's also said to me that she's hoping to have this implementation meeting wrapped up by 10:15. So Councillor Hope's going to give me a swift kick if I don't wrap this up very shortly. I've got 2 hands in the air. I'll go to Councillor Malcolm first, who hasn't spoken, and then I am hoping that...
I'm going to put the motion, which is so you can do that debate.
Thank you. And I'm hoping we're going to move into that conclusion type of speech as opposed to questions. Councillor Malcolm.
I have got a couple of questions, but firstly, and I understand Councillor Callagher's concern about duplicating the Maniototo model, but firstly on the Maniototo, I'm just wondering, is that actually working? Have we got the science and the numbers to prove that it's working? And are we talking to that group on how it works and why it works?
Through the chair, so yes, the field team regularly interact with that group, but Gavin and I also met with them a couple of months ago. They kindly offered to assist us with providing advice as to where such a model, not for their own financial gain, but just from their learnings, how their model operates and where it might be able to be replicated elsewhere. And, it wasn't, as far as I understand, a large number of areas. It definitely depends, and they are sort of, large-scale properties. So we are engaging with them. We are due to inspect the areas that they're under their management, I think, next financial year in our plan. So that's there seems to be general satisfaction with what they're doing, but we will test that with just inspections like we inspect any other area.
So just a question on the McLean scale. At what level do we believe that a rabbit they become a pest both economically and environmentally? So we're on that scale of 1, 2, 3, 4. We will just see that becoming. Where do they actually start affecting things?
Yeah.
I'll let Richard answer that one.
Yeah, certainly level 4, they do start to become a pest of economic importance, and just increasingly as the scale goes up, become more and more of a pest. Below level 3, or I should say below level 4, they're not really having too much impact.
Okay, good. So that was just for me to find out where 3 is. And so the process that you're looking at the moment, just to be clear in my mind, will be really as an evolving process where we're starting probably similar to what we're doing with winter grazing and the likes at the moment, where we're actually engaged in communicating, collaborating, wee bit of advocacy and actually quite a bit of leadership in those phases. But I presume if none of that works, we will pull out the toolbox and use that compliance part of it.
Through the chair, we're doing both at the same time. So we're doing the general compliance work, and we've got a program in place and are doing that. Compliance works best in certain areas with certain sizes of properties. It's much more difficult, and where the problems and the dissatisfaction occur, our compliance tools aren't as helpful. So that is in the more dense urban areas, but we are 100% doing the facilitation alongside the compliance work.
Okay. That's pretty, thanks.
Thank you. And Kate, and I'm going to go to Councillor Noon just briefly as see his views as well. So, Kate,
I've asked questions. I'm now happy to put and speak to the motion when it suits you.
Yeah, I'll just speak to the motion as well when it's...
Yeah, can we just exclude motion 9?
No, I appreciate that. Sorry, I meant 1 to 8.
I'm hoping we can wrap that up relatively quickly. Okay, so...
I think that we have some confusing language in this report, and that's not a criticism. It is a huge topic, and I understand it. I think what we have to be very clear that we are not leading in rabbit control, we are facilitating. They're very, very different jobs, and they actually conflict. If you try and say you're leading something, you cannot facilitate. And I think the focus is, and I'm happy to see it in the actual motion, is we're supporting small-scale landowner-led rabbit control operations. I think the other thing that's missing is a health and safety one here. I have seen far too many bits of peri-urban land, which becomes actually tortuous, especially for older people, but also younger people. I know in the Strathtyre we had one lady who lost a substantial amount of time of work because she broke a leg walking Salt Lake in a rabbit hole. Rabbit holes are actually have a huge health and safety issue as well, which isn't great, and I think is underdone in here. And I just want to focus it on that as well, although it's not usually our concern. The other issue I want to say, I think one of the things is you can go and do predator-free work of any sort all of the time and continue to do it, or you can say we've done it and now we're going to fence it. I think fencing is a tool that we're not using or not enabling well enough, and it isn't just the landowners on the outskirts of a subdivision that benefit from that. And if we can enable a way that a community can say we will pay for this over time, like cosy homes and stuff that other councils have done with heating, we should actually enable a community to say we're going to put those lines up right round us to keep them out, because there's no point wasting our money on doing this stuff all of the time. And the only other note is I think we've got very limited tools, and that comes down to my questioning of paragraph 16. I think that says there's a range of tools. I think that gives an idea that there's lots. There are very, very limited tools that we have available, and I think that's my frustration, and I don't think that came out in the report, and it's not again a criticism, because when you read the whole report that's quite clear, but I think we need to make sure that people realise that pinadine and shooting and fencing are virtually, I think, where you're coming down to now, which is unfortunate.
Great.
And the last one is, I do think there's an opportunity in the rural areas to be looking at as a resource, and we haven't looked at or focused on that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're moving what?
1 to 8, as are, with some frustrations, but that's not anyone's staff blame.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Okay, and speak to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And look, I don't want to be critical, but I think historically, and when I say historically, I'm sort of just thinking back the last decade or whatever, we've probably been missing in action in this space.
Yeah.
So this is a journey that we're on. We're trying to now plug the gap. We've got a good pest management plan adopted around about 12 months ago. We've now got an operational plan that was adopted back in May 2020. As Andrea's alluded to, there's going to be additional staff to come on board. But if you look at the recommendations, nearly each recommendation plugs gaps where we've been missing in action in this last decade. Okay. So this is, and I agree with Councillor Deaker, we made a good summary at the front end. This is probably the most positive paper that I've seen, certainly in my relatively short time on council. And I always like to wait until people like Councillor Callagher and former Councillor Bell speak about rabbits before I ever pass judgment on the paper. Sure, there will be deficiencies and we need to improve on that, but I think this is a real positive step. We've had to develop a regime where we've done a lot of talking, and it's now sort of time to walk the talk. So we're now at that phase, and we will need to massage things as we go on, as we see certain aspects of the implementation of the pest plan and the operational plan, and we see deficiencies, we will tweak that. But there's a lot of positive stuff in here, so I'm very pleased to support the recommendations. And my only other comment, didn't ask the question, but I do recall during the pest management plan consultation, there was talk, and maybe Richard at the time, we discussed about a pest hub being established, like an electronic pest hub online, so people could...
Like the bus hub?
Well, a wee bit different. You wouldn't visit this one physically, but you visit it online. So there was, I'm not sure whether that was implemented as part of our initial stages. It is, Andrea, so that is either happened or happening. It's happened?
Yeah.
Awesome. So there's that tool online now to help educate anyone who wants to be educated in this space as well. So.
And it's called a rabbit hub.
Okay,
Rabbit hub, sorry.
I'm conscious of the time. I'm going to put the motion.
Are we not?
Ask that the motion is put. It's 10:05.
We haven't been allowed to speak to it except for asking questions.
Okay, okay, you'll speak to it, but there'll be a time consequence.
It's all right. Sorry. Very small speech.
Thank you.
Just that I think the reason that the community didn't want us doing rabbit control and that they wanted to do it themselves was because they didn't see it being done well for the rates that they got back in the day. I think it's going to be really important that we have very clear expectations so as that people out there know what they can expect of us doing. So if we're going to ask for more rates or put more into it, the people out there need to know what they can expect of us, because it's the gap between expectation and reality that causes, I think, the mischief here. So that's...
No, that was well said, Councillor Calvert. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. Clarity in messaging. Councillor Malcolm.
Yeah. Look, I do favour this motion and will support it. I have one real concern, and that is our ability to negotiate, talk with and facilitate with the government owners of land and all their other agencies. That's my real concern. I think that is the biggest impediment to our whole scheme. So, whatever help we can give to make sure that happens, I think that's exceptionally important, because that will be the driver to make this successful or not, and get some fencing going that works.
Great. Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder for recommendations 1 to 8. I'm going to put that motion. Those for? Aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right, thank you. Now we're going to refer to the rabbit control assets, recommendation number 9.
I'll move that so that we can get into debate straight away.
Yeah, an option.
And I'm going to move that we decide whether to support option 1. That's what it says. That the council decides.
You have to choose an option.
Yeah, okay. Excuse me. I'm just conscious of time. I think Andrea and Gavin, what you're really after is a steer, isn't it? A steer. Do we want to sell these assets, or do we do on the basis of the survey with 71% of the community, I think it was 160 people came back, said actually retain them? And, so are we really, we're after a steer, do we sell them or do we keep them? And if we keep them, you might do some further work in terms of, do we have an open lease situation to the community or contractors, or do we have a preferred contractor? Because this report doesn't actually have the financials around the benefits, the costs and the risks and all this type of stuff. So there's some further work to be done. So is it really option 1 versus option 2 or 3? Is that really just on the basis of time?
It is, that's correct. Give us a steer, because options 2 and 3 require significant further work around financing model, logistics. Is it, first come, first served, or, all sorts of things, health and safety, the council. A lot of work to go through on options 2 and 3. We didn't want to do that in case you preferred option 1. So eliminating some options now is helpful to us.
Yeah.
Could I move that we prefer option 2, and we'd like to hear back how much, where that takes us.
As opposed to a preferred contractor.
Yep. I'm happy. And as opposed to a preferred selling them. So preferred option 2.
Is there anybody that wants to speak against that perspective?
Yeah, I prefer option 3.
You prefer? Anybody else prefer option 3?
I'm easy.
Well, it's still a preferred thing, so in some ways it doesn't matter 2 or 3, because we would still need to have it come back to us. It gives you an idea to look into the same things, doesn't it? So it's really preferred keep.
So what do you think, Gavin? Do you think we should, I think there's the feel is that but we really don't have the financials. We don't have the risks and all this type of stuff. We're in a position, or should we still keep it open with 2 or 3? Any comment?
It's really your decision. It's a matter of principle. Can you exclude 2 or 3 or keep them in the mix?
Yeah.
See more options. As
So we keep 3 in the mix is the question.
Can we exclude 1 and ask for more?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd like to.
Okay, Mary.
So when I said I was easy between 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I actually have a feeling, I have to say, if I laid out all the priorities on the table of work, I'd rather go for option 1. Because in terms of, all the work that has to be done by staff to work out 2 or 3 and to see if that works or not is work and costs money. Option 1, we get rid of it. There are contractors who will have this stuff. Some of them may want to buy it from us.
They do.
Okay? I really don't see. I know that it was put out there to the public and the public returned that, but I think there is an element of, if you're selling the goods, therefore you're opting out of doing the rabbits. We're not.
Okay.
Okay, and I don't think that was argued.
Okay, is there anybody, I'm conscious of time, is there anybody else that favours option 1? Okay.
Okay.
So we've got one there. Okay, hands in the air, can I suggest, who favours option 2? Yep. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What about option 3? Okay, and I put my hand up at 3 because I'm not sure. I'm either 2 or 3. I honestly don't know. My suggestion is that we actually keep on this basis, that we exclude option 1 and we further explore options 2 or 3.
So if I got a seconder for excluding option 1. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a seconder. I might put that motion.
Yes.
That all we've simply done at this meeting is excluded option 1. Any resistance to that, Dr. Palmer?
Well, of course, you can always go to option 1 at a future date, so excluding it now doesn't mean it's totally off the table. You can come back with options 2 or 3.
In terms of preference.
Option 1,
yes.
We'd like something a bit more positive around affirming options 2 and 3.
Okay.
I'll change that to affirming options 2 or 3.
Affirming options 2 or 3. And I'm going to put that motion. That we're affirming options 2 or 3 and we're inviting staff to come back with further information. Yeah?
Yes,
I'll put that motion. Those 4?
Aye.
Against?
Is I'm against.
Against. 1 against. 2 against.
Yep.
Okay. Motion passed. Okay. But also I think that staff have listened to the debate and as the information goes through, I think, as you said, nothing's totally excluded, but you've asked for a steer, we've given you a steer. Okay, so on that basis, does that cover that recommendation, the final recommendation? Not sure.
Very impressive, Chair. Let's go straight to the recommendation.
Apologies. I think that covers. So on that basis, I conclude this meeting, this discussion over the biosecurity and pass over to my fellow co-chair, Councillor Hope.
1 minute.
And I do apologise again.
That's all right.
Just take what time you need.
Good morning. This is the second part for our new structure committee, Catchment Support Advisory Group report back. We have now got a new tentative agreement called Otago Catchment Communities. And reading the paper, you will know that it has been brought to us. We've got some money from the Eco Fund. We've set this up, and this is where we're at. This is a noting paper. We have got several noting parts to this, notes 2 and notes 3, notes 4, notes 6 and 7. We also are asking for an endorsement to establishing a memorandum of understanding between the Otago Regional Council and the Umbrella Identity, once formed, detailing ongoing partnership and collaboration roles and responsibilities. And I would like to take this time to acknowledge Councillor Hobbs and Councillor Scott for all the hard work you've done in setting this up with all those catchment groups as well, And I see Councillor Hobbs also pointing down here to Ms Howard also too, and to Dr Palmer. And I'd like to take this opportunity to ask both Ms Howard and Dr Palmer, do you have anything to add to our newly structured catchments? We look forward to much work continued, and there's just one thing I think that we should note in passing, is that there is a steering here for us to think about somebody, I'm assuming perhaps from around this table, to go on this new group for target catchment communities. And I'd just like us to note that, please, in our thinking. That's for something we need to refer or defer for a future, but it's in there. And is there anybody else that wishes to speak to this paper?
Question.
Yes, we do. So we'll go Councillor Kelleher, Councillor Calvert. Yes, please, Councillor Kelleher.
Questions?
Sure.
Just around, we mentioned an entity that is to be established, and what type of legal entity are we likely to use? And then will it be able to, is it a shareholding? Is it going to issue new shares as new catchments come on board? How is that going to be structured?
Through the chair, that work's just being done at the moment with a lawyer, so just working through that, but it's an incorporated society, is my understanding.
Was mine. They're meeting today and they're deciding the name today.
Okay.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And we have Councillor Calvert, please.
My question was on the same lines. When you say they are deciding it today, and the suggestion here is that we have a right to have a right and duty, I think, to have representatives for the new.
We've been invited.
Yes,
whether that means a right, I'm not sure.
Yes, so I'd just like to know more about sort of who's setting it up. What is it that does it have representatives from different places? What, yes, we actually don't know.
Yes,
we know where we want it to go, and I think we probably all agree that it's a great idea and everything. It's just that the devil in the detail, and there's just no detail.
And I would imagine, Ms.
potentially
Howard,
devils.
Yeah. Through you, that will be yet to come.
That's correct, through the chair. So we don't own this entity. We're at the moment a major funder, but it is not our entity. And the work is being undertaken right now with the establishment group that's been set up to manage their development into an incorporated society, and part of that will be to develop terms of reference and their operating model.
But it's assuming we're funding it. So we ought to know.
Sorry, we're not the only funders. Sorry, Madam Chair.
No, you're fine.
We're not the only funders. MPI is putting in quite a lot of money as well.
Yes, so I'd
probably as much or more than us.
In that sense,
yes.
This says once formed a funding agreement will be established. I just think that we're committing ourselves to something that we don't actually understand quite what we're committing ourselves. I won't have any problem once I see it, I'm sure. I'm just saying we don't know what we're seeing.
Thank you. Excuse me, before I go to you, Councillor Scott, I have got Director Saunders there. Would you like
sorry, just a clarity on the funding agreement. So there is $200,000 set aside in this year's annual plan. So that is funding that is confirmed, and that's the funding agreement we're referring to, but we can't set that up until so it's not confirming ongoing funding of the group. That's a decision through the long-term plan process, but it is confirming the funding that we have made available and discussed previously for this financial year.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to see what it is we're giving the money to.
That's
happy to move when you're ready.
I think we have the budget.
Okay.
No.
Excuse me. Yes, sure. Yes, yeah. Just one moment. Sorry, I'll just go to Mrs. Gardner and then I will go to Councillor Scott. That's fine.
Did we not? Maybe I'm incorrect, but I think you've had the budget and approved the budget.
Yes,
so
we did.
Yes.
So,
and that fully explained what was being funded.
That's right.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just saying the funding, and I agree with the funding, and it's a good idea, and it's going to all the right people and everything, and great if MPI is adding to it. And things. I just want to know where it's going, and this doesn't tell me. Once I know, I'll like it. I'm sure.
Right.
This doesn't tell me where.
Yes, and I think, as you say, that's...
Is it, for example, if an incorporated society usually just has members and they come and go and can go bankrupt any day or not go, well, I mean, whatever, nobody's really responsible. And this suggests that we might have representatives on it, but we don't know. So,
Councillor Calvert, could we just bear with your patience, because I think what you'll find is, as Ms Howard said, it'll come. And am I correct here, Councillor Scott, going to you?
Yeah, I mean, this council has approved, the expenditure, and in the expenditure was the establishment of a group and was the engagement of various personnel to do certain visionary things. And we need to just sort of bear with the process, because nobody actually knows the answer to some of your questions, because that's why they're getting legal advice and step by step, and as Marion said, getting the name today and how it all works, and that's why we've only committed for a certain period of time. And if we have any concerns, that's why we'll have somebody on the board, and that's why we'll debate it on the LTP. And as soon as they move forward, this council will be communicated with.
Can I be enthusiastic about the idea and abstain? Because I'm not sure what I'm enthusiastic about. I'm sure it's a good plan.
That's fine. I've got Councillor Hobbs here.
I just want to go back a little bit. Catchment groups are not new. There are lots of existing catchment groups in our area.
Yes.
Those catchment groups wanted some coordination and wanted some gaps filled where there were parts and catchments which had no catchment groups in them. They came to us, if you remember. They sat down there.
Yes, that's right.
And they asked us. We responded with $200,000 and a catchment support advisory group, which was just to try and do the work that Andrea's outlined and set them on the way. What we had to do, and Brian did this really well every time in the chairing, was to make sure that this wasn't a council-dominated thing owned by us, that this was owned by the community and that they'd take responsibility. The problem they face, as they pithily point out at most meetings, is that they get volunteer fatigue.
Yes.
And they wanted to be able to employ people to compensate for the volunteer fatigue that happens not only in rural communities but very strongly so. And that's what basically this funding is about, is putting in support people, coordinators, to continue the work that's been there and to eventually identify where the gaps are.
Yeah, and to be able to answer the questions that Hillary's raised.
As I say, I'm keen on the whole thing, just don't know what it is.
Thank you, Councillor Hobbs. I appreciate that. We've got Councillor Malcolm here, and then we've got Councillor Wilson.
Look, I think this is one of the probably the greatest steps that ORC has made in many, many years. And I think everywhere we go, we talk about the formation of this group, although I forgot its name yesterday. Richard will remind me of that. But in reality, this is what our public has wanted. I think the only thing missing in this whole summary would be really good to refresh the names of the people on that group, and I think that would give people a great deal of comfort. I sort of know them, but that would just give us a bit of comfort, I think. So let's push ahead. They want the science, they want support on understanding the MPS and the regional plans, and they want that facility to stop that fatigue that the volunteers are getting. So everyone's excited. So I just think a great step and great work by staff and that group as it goes. So.
Thank you, Councillor, and I appreciate that. And you did endorse that yesterday when we were at Middlemarch, and I appreciate that very much, your enthusiasm and excitement for that. So that's grand. Now we have Councillor Wilson here, and followed by Councillor Noon.
So I just want to see the motion put.
Yes.
But I would like to change number 3 slightly in the process of putting it, and that is notes with thanks, the Catchment Support Advisory Group. And to my mind, and as much as we've thanked the people around this table who've been on that, the people who've had to travel the most, I think, have been those fatigued and much called upon volunteers and leaders in their communities to do this stuff. So if you wouldn't mind if we can add, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we're thanking you too, Brian. But I'm just delighted to see this happening and to go forward.
Thank you. And I assume, Councillor Wilson, you are moving the motion?
Yeah,
and I have a seconder here, Councillor Malcolm, and we'll just wait for our lovely Liz to dazzle her fingers.
She has.
Oh, good girl. Yes, thank you. Number 3, and we have Councillor Noon here.
And my comment can just be speaking to the motion. I think just to appease Councillor Calvert's concerns, roles, responsibilities and expectations will be clearly spelled out in the Memorandum of Understanding.
Yes.
So this is very much a partnership, and it'll be clear the roles of either party.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Noon. Anything else here from Ms Howard, Dr Palmer? Mrs. Gardner?
Is it really moved, Calvert? I thought Calvert was abstaining.
I think it's Wilson, but that's fine. I'm not sure that I want to be compared, but that's okay.
All right. Are we ready now to take, we've got number 1 to 7? And are we happy to, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Councillor Calvert's noted, passed. Thank you. This is the end of our round.
Thank you.
Thank you.